Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D modeling tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a royal crown. Okay, so first what I want to do is I want to go to my poly pen and I'm going to work in a flat plane first. So what I'm going to do is going to make a polygon, command click and drag, and I'm in point mode. And I'm going to pull up and bring up a few polygons. Bring this one up to here. I'm going to straighten out this line in a minute. And what I'm going to do is bring down, say, another polygon, but I'm going to kind of slope this down a little bit towards this direction. Seems about right. And then just make some fine adjustments here. Let me bring this to here. And these I have weld on, so if you bring over your point, it will weld, so we have auto weld on. Snap this here. And I'm probably gonna need another row. Let's see how this turns out. I think that's fine. Looks like this one didn't snap. Snap that one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my rectangle selection, select these points, press T, holding down Shift for 10-degree increments until you get to 0. So that straightens those points out. Press the space bar, select these, press the space bar again, hold down Shift to 0. We'll flatten this out. We're gonna press spacebar again and select these points, spacebar, and then holding down Shift to 0. Now what I like to do whenever I'm doing a little bit of modeling in a 2D version, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my loop selection and I'm gonna choose select boundary loop. Oops, make sure I check that. And it's going to select the whole points all the way around the border. UI will reverse that. And then I'll go to MC for my brush. And I'm going to go to smooth. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to smooth these out. And it just kind of separates these and these polygons so they're a little bit more uniform. And you may have to make some adjustments. If you go to your slide tool, you can adjust these points so a little bit more even here. So I think this looks pretty good. Maybe adjust these a little bit. Now, what I also want to do is I want to bring this point up maybe and give this crown have more of a point here. So I may have to just make some fine-tune adjustments a little bit. Maybe bring this point up a little bit and just kind of space this out just slightly. Okay, so let me go back and just make sure this is straight real quick. Okay, next what I want to do is you'll notice that I'm not on the center line here, and that's okay. In fact, I can even move this over a little bit more. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror this over. So I'm going to go to polygon mode, go to mirror. Now, I don't know if you've seen my other videos, but for the mirror tool, you want to think of this tool as being used as the monitor that you're using is separated in an X. So you imagine a line that goes from the corner of your monitor over to the next, and then there's another one that goes across. So anything that's below this plane within this V is going to be for the horizontal. Excuse me. get back to my front view. Anything that's on the side will be connected over to your vertical plane. So I'm going to release, and I'm not quite exactly over, and that's okay. What I can do is just use my directional tool, pull this in, and then I'm going to use the bridge tool, go to edge mode, and I'm just going to bridge these over. You could use stitch and sew too. So now that we have this made, what I want to do next is add in a mirror these over so that we have a few of these to work with. And if this point isn't exactly perfect, that's okay. We can stretch this out a little bit, maybe use soft selection. So what I'm going to do is in polygon mode, make sure that is deselected, go to my mirror tool, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'll snap to that point. We have, I believe we have weld points on. I'm going to do that again. I guess I'm going to do this, say, maybe we have 6 points. That'll snap, snap, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more. Okay, so next what I want to do is let me go to my perspective mode, kind of see what we're working with here. So we have this flat plane of these sort of points that are connected. And now what we can do is we can then use a bend deformer to sort of give this crown sort of a little bit of shape as it forms outward. Say, imagine this being the bottom and this kind of just flows outward. And let me show you what I mean. If I go to let me go to model mode, and I'm going to turn on my lines and be on your keyboard just so we could see that. And I want to go to my bend deformer. And if you use the strength, you can see where it's bending. So if I drag this underneath my polygon, you can see how this bends. And so what I want to do is I'll maybe want to shrink this down. So I can go to fit to parent, and I always add in a little bit of size. I don't like it at 0. And what I want to do is I want to make some adjustments here, and then maybe pull this up. Oops, I'm using my mirror tool. Let me pull this up. And let me rotate around so you can see a little bit better. Go back to my bent deformer. And what we can do is we can experiment a little bit with the strength and where this bend is physically located, its actual coordinates of using the directional tool. So I don't want to go below this line. I want to keep that pretty flat. But I do want to adjust this a little bit, and you may have to make it a little bit taller, and that's fine too. Go back to perspective mode, and I think that'll work fine. So what I can do next is select these, right click, current state to object. It's going to give you a duplicate. So I'm going to hide my original with the bend deformer. We have now a object that does not have the bend deformer, and it has a shape already baked in. So we're going to add in another deformer. And just as before, just want to show you the angle of which it's going towards. Now I want something that will wrap around in a 360-degree angle. So let's adjust this using our rotate tool. It's going to rotate this around 90 degrees, holding down shift. And then I'm going to rotate in the other direction, and I don't quite have that axis band. Make sure that's highlighted. Rotate that around, hold down Shift, 90 degrees. And now let's put this under our polygon, and let's fit to parent. And that is a disaster. Let's make sure this is undo for a second. Okay, that's what I want. Fit to parent. So I just had to rotate that one more time to 90 degrees. So like I said, 360 degrees. So you can just type that in, and that will rotate around. Now you'll notice that this connection point, as I make this into a current state to object, so I'm going to select these, right click, current state to object. I'm going to hide our duplicate, select our polygon, and you'll notice that if I go to point mode, and I'm just going to use the poly pen tool, these points aren't connected. So what you can do is you can go to weld. So I'm going to select these points. Let me zoom in so you can see a little bit better. MQ, and to the point of the center of our center line for this object. Now connect. I'm going to select, pull that over, MQ, or I can just hit the space bar to go back to my other tool, the previous used tool. Space bar again, and make sure, zoom in a little bit, that I'm connecting to the center here. You don't want to connect over here, then it'll look all awkward. Space bar again. Oops, let me make sure these 2 points are selected. Space bar again, and then connect that over. Oops. And we'll have this all weld up. You could also put this into a connect object. You can do that as well, but I just did this manually. Okay, so now we have our basic shape of our crown. We're getting pretty close. We're not quite there yet. So what I want to do next is I'm going to select our polygon, and we can name this. At this point, we can start naming this crown. And so what we have here is it's all flat at this point. So let's give this some depth. So I'm going to go to my polygon mode, select all, D for extrude. We're going to make sure we have create caps on because we want to back to this. And we're going to click and drag and pull this out. And we can give this a decent thickness. So this is looking pretty good. The only thing that I would like to do now is show you what this is going to look like in a subdivision surface. So I'm going to go to subdivision surface, grab our crown, put this underneath, and you can see how the smoothing rounds out our object. And let's just kind of give this a once over, kind of take a look at making sure all points are connected. So I'm going to hide this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom here. I'm going to go to UL, and we have our select boundary loop still checked, so uncheck that. Select these ring of polygons, and we can go to our directional tool, Command, click and drag in this axis. You can see this axis being highlighted in white. Drag this down. Command, click and drag again. I'm going to give this a little bit more room. Command click and drag again. Okay. So next what I want to do is I want to go to UL, get our loop selection again. I'm going to select this loop. I'm going to go to D for an extrude, but in this case I'm going to take off create caps, click and drag, and give this sort of a little bit of a lip, a little bit of a ring here. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom here, D. Click and drag and pull this out. And now if I turn on my subdivision surface, you'll notice that we have this kind of a ring here, and I'll render to my picture viewer, or my viewport, and you can see how this turns out. Now if you want to tighten this up a little bit more, what you can do is, if you go to K, KL will give us our loop cut. And I like to turn off the subdivision surface because it kind of gets in my way a little bit of being able to see some of these interior lines, these interior loops. So what you can do is you can put a loop cut, and this will be a sharpening cut that will go around each of the loops. So we're just going to put a few cuts in here, one on the bottom here, and one down here. Now we can put one on either side if we really want to get this tight. And let's turn our subdivision surface on. That might be a little too sharp, but let's do a render. I think that's okay. You can use your own judgment on this one. And in this case, we may even want to keep this bottom part without any edge cuts or sharpening cuts, sharpening edges. We might like to have that. I think that looks pretty good where it just kind of smooths over, and this one's a little bit more of a sharper edge. Now for the ones up top here, we can also sharpen this up a little bit. So if I go to my crown, we can also put in a few sharpening edge loops here, as well as on this side and maybe even on this side here. And like I said, it gets a little difficult to see when you're putting in these cuts with the subdivision surface on. There we go. You're kind of fighting with it, so I usually just turn it off. And now if I turn on the subdivision surface, you can see this nice cut. Let me go to model mode, and I can even go to NA to take off our lines. And then let's pull this back out a little bit. Okay, you can see that now it's pretty sharp, and if I render, you can see we have a nice smooth looking crown. Now we can add in some more details to this if you like, and I'll show you how you do that in the next lesson. Okay, I want to hide this crown, and I want to go to a sphere. So go to primitives, choose a sphere. Let's go to O on the keyboard, and B so we can bring up our lines. I'm going to go to 12 segments, and we're going to go to hexahedron. Press C to make it editable, and rotate around here just a bit. I'm going to go to my rectangle selection tool, make sure I'm in polygon mode, and then go to tolerance selection. Let's select these polygons, and then delete, return to go to point mode, and we're going to right click and go to optimize to clear out those points. Next, what I want to do is I want to go to my disk. So go to primitives, choose a disk, and we're going to go to X. And then we want to make the inner radius 100 because we know our sphere is at 100. And then we'll go to 120 for our outer radius. Let's bring down our disk segments, and we can add in 20 for our rotation segments. That should give us enough geometry to have this smoothed out. Okay, great. So next what I want to do is I want to maybe make this a bit larger for our outer radius, or excuse me, our inner radius. I just want to give it enough of a space when we subdivide. Because it shrinks it just a bit, I just want to give it enough space so we get a nice little shadow in there when we render. Okay, next what I want to do is make this editable. So C on the keyboard, and I want to go to polygon mode, select all, D, make sure we create caps, extrude. That should be enough thickness, I think. You can adjust this directional tool if you want to make it a little bit thicker. And then I want to make some edge cuts, some loop cuts around these edges just to sharpen these edges up when we subdivide. So I'm going to hide this sphere just so it doesn't get in our way. KL. And let's zoom in. And I'm going to put some lines, some loop cuts on either side of our edges. Here, 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 and let's put some in the back here as well. Okay, great. So let's pull out. Let's go to our sphere. And what I want to do is I want to make this smaller. So what I'm going to do is put this into a null, Option G. And I can just name this details. And if I bring back one of our polygons that we used, I think it was this one here. Let's make this smaller, this our little details here. So let's shrink this down. Okay, great. So let's now duplicate these, and let me just take a look at my crown in relation. I'm just kind of looking at the size relation of my detail, make sure it's going to fit in between these two rims. So maybe we shrink this down a little bit more. So what I want to do, let's hide our polygon that we made from current state to object. And I want to bring back this other one. Let's see. We should have another view. There we go. And we'll hide the bend deformer. And the reason why I just have this open is just for position purposes. And I'm going to go to Command click and drag in this axis just to duplicate these details, these little jewels. And command click and drag. And so now we have a bunch of these nulls. So let's consolidate by going to our sphere. By holding down command, we'll select each of the spheres, right click, connect objects plus delete. We'll do the same thing to our disk. Right click, connect objects plus delete, and we can get rid of these nulls. So let's do a little bit of cleanup. Okay, let's hide our one polygon that we had. However, let's grab this bend and command click and drag. And now we have the same bend deformer that we used for our crown. And you'll notice that we have it at 360 degrees. It's going to wrap around our object, or around our crown. So I want to grab our crown, and I want to go to Mesh, Axis Center, Center Axis 2. That's going to snap our manipulation tool, our gizmo, right in the center. And we can shrink this down a little bit, because you'll notice that if you zoom in, this is kind of intersecting a little bit. So let's give this a little bit here, and we can also pull this down if we go to E, drag this down a bit. Let's zoom in, and we're looking pretty good. Now what I want to do is I want to go to our our sphere. Now I don't want to subdivide this because I want to experiment a little bit with our tag here. We have our font tag. And so what I want to do is I want to make another null. Let's go to our null. And so let's grab our sphere. I'm going to command, click and drag, and put this in our null. And I'm going to do the same thing with our bend. I'm going to command, click and drag, put this underneath our null. Okay, great. So what we can then do now is, I guess we really didn't need to duplicate the sphere. So let me delete that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this. This is our disk. This is what we do want to have in our subdivision. So I'm just going to go to right click, current state object. And that's this one right here. And so what I'm going to do is bring this, drag this underneath our subdivision, select our crown and our details, Option G, and we'll make this crown. I think it's fine. So we now have that subdivided. Let's do a render. And you can see that we have everything that looks good. Let's take a look at our disk. For some reason that's not subdividing. Let's figure this out. Here's our sphere. This is outside of our... Oh, it might be because we have our details of our previous one open, or it's still unhidden. So when we render, it's going to be rendering. There we go. So just make sure you hide by pressing on these stoplights to make sure our original object that we have our bend deformer on, before we put in our current state object, make sure that's hidden. So when you render, that's going to be a nice smooth ring around our jewel. So what we could then do is, if we go to our sphere and I go to our fong tag, maybe we can experiment a little bit with the fong. Maybe bring this down so it's a bit of a sharper edge and kind of give us more of a jewel look on our object. So let's pull this back out. Give this one last render, and you may want to add in another subdivision since we're in our viewport. Just one final render. So there you can do a pretty quick exercise in using a flat plane geometry and then using deformers, these bend deformers, in order to get the shape that you want. And you can reuse these deformers for all these little details. And you can experiment with the fong tag in order to get sort of more of a jewel look when you render. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.